Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Series 6 or Season 32, Episode 13, The Wedding of River Song. Right, so in just 45 minutes, Stephen Moffat is going to wrap up the Series 6 series arc and answer a couple of questions that have been posed throughout this series and maybe a few from Series 5, or maybe attempt to answer some from Series 5, as well as going to explain a few things concerning River Song, as well as the Doctor. So, can he do it? Short answer, not really. Long answer, well, that's what this review's about, so let's take a look at The Wedding of River Song. First of all, I just want to get this off the bat. The first 19 and a half minutes are absolutely fantastic. This first third of the story is absolutely fan-dabby doozy fantastic. It's later in the episode where things go a bit downhill, but more on that later. Just trying to get out there my honest opinions of the story. The first third of the story is brilliant. It's fantastic. And then it goes down a bit later on. And I know this is an unpopular story amongst fans, so those who aren't so keen on this episode, don't worry, I'm going to get to the negatives later. But first, the positives. Absolutely fantastic first 19 and a half minutes where the Doctor is coming to terms with accepting his fate. However, at the same time, he's not quite ready. So whilst he's waiting, he goes off to do some investigating on the Silence. He first travels to see a Dalek. So this is the Dalek cameo of the series, meaning that there doesn't have to be a Dalek story this series, so long as there's a Dalek appearance, if that deal with the Terry Nation estate is in fact true, or at least up to 2017 anyway, that the Daleks had to appear at least once every year, or once a series or something, at least up until 2017 and Series 10, as Series 11 and 2018 managed to get away with it. And if that's true, then this is especially noticeable during the Stephen Moffat era. But anyway, so the Doctor goes and sees what appears to be the Supreme Dalek. It's a white Paradigm Dalek, which doesn't make sense because if it would be the Supreme Dalek, shouldn't it be a red drone Dalek? Especially as the Supreme Dalek's in the next Dalek story, Asylum of the Daleks, which is in 2 episodes' time, and this Dalek that actually appears here is actually in the Asylum. So that doesn't make sense. It should be a red one, or an orange one, or a blue one. Or at least the Eternal Dalek, because then that at least makes sense for that Dalek not to appear in Asylum, and the Supreme Dalek to be there without being, hang on a minute, there's another Supreme Dalek in the Asylum. So, yeah, it is a bit odd. If it's supposed to be a grey Dalek, we haven't been introduced to those guys yet. Anyway, so the Doctor gets some information from the Dalek's databank about the Silence, and also its eye stalk to prove that he is a force to be reckoned with. And he goes and sees this man called de Vandeleur, I believe. Gideon de Vandeleur, who is a member of the Silence. However, Vandeleur has been dead for 6 months, and it turns out the man the Doctor is meeting is in fact the Tesselector from Let's Kill Hitler, who is undercover investigating the Silence. The Doctor learns that their weakest link is a man called Gantok, who, although in the credits there is an actor listed, that name is a pseudonym, I believe. And in fact, it's Mark Gatiss who's playing Gantok. Ooh, that's a fun fact. Gantok and the Doctor play a game of live chess. This is quite interesting, but Gantok almost loses if the Doctor does not conceal the game. I believe if the Doctor means that he will let Gantok win, or he decides to allowing you lose or something. But Gantok promises to take him to see Dorian Maldover, who will explain everything. But Dorian's dead. He was killed in A Good Man Goes to War at Demon's Run. Gantok will later explain to the Doctor that the headless monks keep the heads of their victims. Some heads are kept in boxes because they are rich or can afford it, and this includes Dorian's head. So the heads can somehow stay alive without the rest of their bodies being there. I'm sure there's some sort of explanation that wasn't explained, but I'm sure there's something out there. Gantok falls victim to a trap, and it turns out the skulls eat rats, and they eat Gantok. So the Doctor is able to stop the evade them, and he and Dorian's head have a little chat to himself, where Dorian reveals to the Doctor the question that that the Silence want to not be spoken on the fields of Trenzalore. We won't know what the question is until the end of the episode, and that ends the episode on that note, but more on that later. It's revealed that this place called on this place called at this place called Trenzalore, this question will be asked and silence in the I and for the silence must fall. So the question must never be asked as far as they're concerned. So the Doctor takes Dorian to the TARDIS and basically has a little bit of a 10th Doctor moment where he says he doesn't have to go to his death straight away. He can do a lot more. He can do a lot before he accepts his death. So a bit like that 10th Doctor bit where he was saying, I could do so much more in the end of time. However, unlike the 10th Doctor, like the 10th Doctor in the end of time, a old friend of the Doctor's brings the 11th Doctor back down to reality, and he realizes it's time for him to go. And this is probably the best scene of the episode, where the 11th Doctor calls up Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, only to discover that he has sadly passed away. This scene is in tribute to actor Nicholas Courtney, who sadly passed away in February 2011. So this scene was written as tribute to the actor and to the character of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. It's also worth noting that the Brigadier, without having to say anything, is the only character who could properly persuade the Doctor to face his death at this moment in time, and the Doctor realises it's time to go. He asks the Tesselector to deliver the messages to his friends and to his younger self in Canton, and eventually heads to Lake Silencio to face his death. Which he is aware of will be committed by his murder will be by River Song in the astronaut suit. The only part about this sequence that doesn't make sense is that River says that the suit is in control. So it begs the question why the Silence need to have her in the suit in the first place. Why not just send the suit? Or just have River kill the Doctor another way. Or some brainwashed her and she can't control the brainwashing, but it's in fact the suit that's in control, not brainwashing or anything. So, yeah, we've got this established back in episode 2 in Day of the Moon that the suit can move on its own. So why does River need to be in the suit? That's the only bit about these first 19 and a half minutes that doesn't work, is the suit. But everything up to the bit where River shoots the Doctor is absolutely fantastic. Apart from that lack of logic there, some amazing stuff. I'm not going to mention about the whole time going wrong thing until I get onto the next bit, because that's affected by what happens next. So I'll just focus on the Doctor's progression into investigating the Silence and coming to terms with his death. Since the Doctor believes it is indeed a fixed point in time and doesn't have a plan to trick time and somehow cheat death in any way, or at least until later on, where it's revealed that at one point he got some sort of last minute plan. But it's interesting to see the Doctor going through these bits where he's just trying to investigate the Silence and eventually coming to terms with his death. So he then arrives at Lake Silencio, ready and waiting, and these are all really great bits. It is a bit strange that we keep going to several different locations in a quick succession, but it's handled really well. It flows pretty nicely, and Matt Smith, as well as actors around him, do brilliant jobs in their roles. I do have to mention the Dalek. The Dalek voice, brilliant job by Nicholas Briggs again, but I forgot to mention him with the Cybermen last time. Again, another great job, although they've got that funny tweak to the voice modulation that the next Doctor had. But here with the Dalek, I do have to mention that it sounds more like a Cyberman voice than a Dalek voice, so I'm not sure what happened there. Again, it was probably something to do with the voice modulation or something. Thankfully, Nicholas Briggs will be doing better Dalek voices next time we'll see the Daleks in 2 episodes' time. So, anyways, apart from a few niggles, these first 19 and a half minutes are absolutely amazing. Again, I'm not talking about the time going wrong section until... There's a very noisy car outside, I apologise for that. Now, okay, so when the Doctor faces his death, it turns out River has somehow been able to drain the battery of the weapon system of the suit. Don't know how, it doesn't really say. And then time somehow goes wrong because the Doctor doesn't die. So, yeah, that happens, and then time goes wrong, which means everything happens at the same time. We get a couple of good stuff with that, of all the time going wrong. There's some nice stuff in the pre-titles, and Winston Churchill's now the Holy Roman Emperor of the present day. I won't cover everything, partly because there's a lot, and partly because I might not remember, but there's certainly everything is happening at once. All at the same time, and the time has frozen at 5:02 p.m. on the 22nd of April 2011. Um, so Winston Churchill, now the Holy Roman Emperor. By the way, it's nice to see Charles Dickens and not Eldred Malekith, the Silurian from The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, make cameos in this story as well. But yeah, Winston Churchill has basically realised something's wrong, so he calls the Doctor to explain it to him. And throughout the first 19.5 minutes, we will cut back to the Doctor and Churchill in conversation as they're walking through Churchill's Senate. But it turns out they have been hunting Silence, who are all around them, and they are rescued by a whole batch of Silence that are sleeping on the ceiling, like we see in Day of the Moon. They're rescued by a rebellion group against the Silence, led by Amy Pond, who has a brilliant bit where she goes Pond, Amelia Pond, fantastic James Bond reference there, and she takes the Doctor to Area 52, a American-owned pyramid, times all over the place. And she takes him there to help with sorting things out. Amy is one of the few people who remembers the original timeline and has drawn pictures and writing down stuff in order to remember. However, one thing she's forgotten is what Rory looks like. And it turns out Rory is in fact Captain Williams, Amy's most loyal soldier person. So it's a little funny that Amy can't see what Rory looks like, but don't worry, they're going to be back together before the end of the episode. They also have a lot of Silence in these liquid glass cube cabinets in the pyramid and they walk through that before getting to the main pyramid bit, which River Song is currently occupying with a captured Madame Kavarian. How they captured her, I don't know. But anyway, the Doctor and River kind of have a bit of an argument about what's going on, and the Silence break out and attempt to kill everyone with the eye drives that everyone's wearing, because the people are wearing these things called eye drives, which are what we've assumed the eye patches were, as a way to remember the Silences. But it now can be used as a weapon against everyone, including Madame Kavarian. So the Doctor and River get out of there with Amy following, but Captain Williams stays behind to stop the Silence. Thankfully, Amy comes back to save him with a really cool moment where she has a machine gun. Okay, I will say, despite the story kind of going a little bit downhill after the bit where River decides not to shoot the Doctor, it kind of goes down a little bit there. There is some really cool moments throughout, and there's some really good stuff, especially Amy mowing down the Silence with a machine gun. That's probably my second favourite scene of the episode, after the bit with the Brigadier. That was just wonderful scene. And then Amy's cold bloodlust comes out here. I think since series 5, Amy has definitely had a bit more of a colder streak inside of her when it comes to some of the villains. She definitely is not afraid to killing people, even if she reflects on the fact it's wrong later on. She's definitely got a cold streak in her, and this is probably Amy Pond's coldest moment, apart from a scene in Asylum of the Daleks, where we'll get to. But in this case, it's pretty cool, whilst in Asylum of the Daleks, it's really bad. But Amy kills Madame Kavarian by reattaching a falling off eye drive over her eye and letting the Silence kill her. I find that a pretty cool bit, that Amy basically gets revenge on Madame Kavarian, and as this is an aborted timeline, Kavarian might actually still be alive somewhere out there in the real universe. Maybe Tasha Lem from the Papal Mainframe goes after her and delivers her own type of punishment before or after the events of the time of the Doctor, perhaps, or during. It's speculation what happened to the real Kavarian, but it would be pretty cool if it did turn out that Amy did kill her as revenge for Kavarian hurting her, the Doctor, Rory, and River. So yeah, I thought that was a good moment. And then we get to the rooftop scenes where the Doctor marries River as a way to try and get her to go ahead with time going back, going back to normal with Amy and Rory witness, and they're eventually able to put time back on track. Okay, I know what Stephen Moffat's trying to do. He's trying to have this. What if River decides not to kill Doctor? Time goes a bit funny. I can see what he's doing there. I can get on board with that. It's kind of damaging the character progressions of the series so far, but there's also building something with River and Amy and Rory's relationship with the Doctor. It's trying to do something there. I think the silence breaking out was possibly a bit of a distraction. If this episode was an hour, perhaps it wouldn't have been so much of a distraction. But I think there could have been a little bit. Maybe it was a little bit more better paced, because we've already spent about just over a third of the episode building it up, and now we got all of this, and then it's happening quite quickly, so we can then get to the resolution at the end. And then it turns out, when time is put back on track, it turns out that the Doctor was not actually the Doctor, but instead, when he last visited the Tesselector, he then went actually thinking about it, and then decided to go inside the Tesselector, and the Tesselector posed as the Doctor. This basically ruins the whole character development of the Doctor throughout the series. The entire episode where he knows his time's up, but he's not going down without a fight. He's going to do a bit of partying until he gets the phone call with the Brigadier, realising it's now time to go. But then, almost immediately afterwards, when he next sees the Tesselector disguised as the Vandeleur, I believe his name is, next time he sees the Tesselector, he then goes, actually thinking about it now, I just thought about this, I just thought about it now, that, even though I've accepted my fate, now I just thought of this brilliant idea. That kind of ruins the progression of the character, and it sort of downgrades the Amy, Rory and River stuff that was also playing throughout these other scenes as well. It's kind of a slap in the face, really. If this was the Doctor's plan as soon as he found out he was going to die from Amy, he started to wonder, okay, now I've got to find out when, where, how, and who kills me. He's sort of getting it's River Song. Then he finds out the information from the Tesselector itself, and then he goes off after travelling with Amy and Rory, and after his bit with Craig in the last episode, he then tries to understand the why. After this, from the silence, after discovering they want him dead, and after the events of A Good Man Goes to War and Let's Kill Hitler. So after all of that, he would then have to come up with some sort of a plan to avoid his death, and that is the what. What will his great plan to escape will be? And I think that should have happened a lot sooner. Instead of going around investigating the silence could have been fine, but instead of gloating about going on a farewell tour like he's done, and like the 10th Doctor did before his regeneration, and having to be brought back, like the 10th Doctor, having to be brought back to reality by a good friend of his, or rather in this case, the passing of which, instead, as much as I love that scene with the Brigadier tribute, if the Doctor had had a plan to escape death from day one, or day one as soon as he got the information, then it could have worked. But instead, it's a last minute actually thinking about it. So that actually ruins the character growth. If it was a 7th Doctor style plan of cheating death as a way of, oh, you have a plan for me to die? Well, I've got a counter plan to escape that whilst making it look like I've died. So time would still stay fixed. It's still a fixed point in time. Time's not going to go wibbly wobbly timey wimey like it does in this episode when River decides not to kill the Doctor. But I'm still going to be alive after this, and then I'm going to hide back into the shadows afterwards. But instead, it's a last minute thing. It's a last minute change of mind, and not even one that's gradually gotten there. It just doesn't quite work. It ruins the Doctor's character growth throughout the episode, and in fact through the series. If it was a plan from day one, it would have worked. But as it was a last minute thing, and it also affects the characters of Amy, Rory, and River as well, unfortunately, because the whole character growth throughout this series now comes to absolutely nothing. Nobody's learnt their lesson from previously in the series. If it was planned from day one, then it could have been a clever way to escape death. But as it is, it doesn't work. Again, if it was the Seventh Doctor, he would have pulled it off with flying colours. But unfortunately, 11 just decides to do a quick, just a quick turnaround. Just only like a couple of an hour or so after, or I don't know how many exact times have passed, but just the scene after he accepts death, basically. He then visits the Vandalur, and then later on it's revealed that at the end of that meeting, he then changes his mind and goes, actually, so that's my main issue with this story. It could have worked if it had been a plan from day one, but as it was a last minute thing, it doesn't quite work, and it kind of ruins the character growth for the characters throughout the series, especially in this story, as most of the episode is focused on River trying to not kill the Doctor. So that's unfortunate. That's disappointing. Amy, Rory, and River do know that the Doctor is still alive. Well, River knows, as the Doctor told her to look into his eye, which revealed he was the Tesselector to her, and she sort of technically married the Tesselector, and in an alternative timeline. So does that mean they're actually married properly? Well, actually, funny enough, I was actually looking at a image on Pinterest earlier, where the 13th Doctor had asked River to remarry her because she'd regenerated, and River said, "Oh, right, it's the 5,100 and something time," implying that the Doctor and River have married 5,000 plus times. That was just a funny image someone drew up. So it's possible the Doctor and River could have had a remarriage, a re-wedding, perhaps renewed their vows or something properly after the events of this episode. It's that or River goes around. It's that or the Doctor and River marry 5,000 plus times. But that's not so much of a worry. But River knows about the Doctor. She also somehow knows his name, which I think that was what he told her in Let's Kill Hitler. I think that's my theory, that he told her River Song his name in that episode, and then here it's the look into my eye bit, and then said that he told her his name so that Amy and Rory would believe that. But and then River reveals what they actually said. And then the Doctor returns Dorym to his spot. They have a last little chat. By the way, Simon Fisher-Becker does a great job as Dorym here. It's his last appearance in the show, and he does a great job. By the way, I don't know if I've mentioned this either in my Pandora Opens Big Bang or Good Man Goes to War review. I might have in the Pandora Opens one, but me and Simon Fisher-Becker, we're friends on Facebook, and he's a nice guy. And it turns out that the question is Doctor Who. And it seems like the last minute of this episode is setting up what's coming up later on down the line. Not so much in what actually does happen in Series 7, because Series 7 goes a different direction, but what could have happened in Series 8 had Matt Smith stayed on. But yeah, we get the whole setup for what's to come later on with the Field of Trenzalore, the fall of the 11th Doctor, and the question Doctor Who. So this episode does sort of wrap up the stuff from this series, but it's still leaving a few things open-ended, and it does feel like it's going to be set up for later on in the series. And Series 7 isn't going to focus on it as much because it's going to be the 50th anniversary series. It's going to focus on standalone adventures as well as a new mystery concerning upcoming companion Clara Oswald. More on that later. Perhaps Stephen Moffat planned for Matt Smith to do a 4th series, but Smith decided to step down after doing 3. So everything does kind of come together in the Time of the Doctor, with a few things in the Series 7 finale, The Name of the Doctor. So we'll talk about those when we get to those stories, but at this point in time, it's just setting up more and more mystery, and it could have paid off better, but due to what happens later on, it doesn't come to a satisfying conclusion. So, yeah, and I think this episode kind of doesn't help with that, because it's wrapping up some stuff here, but it sets up more stuff to ask about, and Series 5 had already left a few things open-ended, ready and waiting for Series 6 and future series to answer, and then we got a whole lot of other stuff on top of that, which would have been fine if it was a self-contained series, but it's still there's still stuff coming up. And whilst that's also fine, it feels like there's just more and more being added on at the very end. We should at least be wrapping up first. So this episode is a bit of a jumble. It doesn't have any priorities. That's something I said at the start of the series with my Impossible Astronaut David the Moon review, that like Series 13, once it starts filming, it's going to start filming in a few weeks. Hopefully the scripts are all done, which means I'm hoping that series is going to prioritise certain things for that series that needs to be prioritised. And I was saying at the start of this series, that Series 6 had to do some priority stuff. Series 12 failed with doing priority stuff, because that series did stories like Orphan 55, Nicholas Tesla's Night of Terror, Praxis, and not so much Can You Hear Me? That one was quite important for the character growth of the companions. But the other stories didn't really have an awful lot in terms of character companion or Doctor companion growth, or with the big story arc. So that series doesn't quite prioritise its stories, and that's what I'm saying about Series 13. That needs to prioritise stories for its story arc or for character growth and development. And Series 6, I said at the start of these reviews, had to do the same thing. And while Series 6 has mostly been successful, especially in the first half, not so much the second half between Let's Kill Hitler and closing time, but the series arc has been very successful in the stories prior to this point. However, I think Wedding River, well, apart from Let's Kill Hitler, but Wedding River Song kind of drops the ball a bit, and it ultimately comes to a not completely satisfactory ending. First time viewing, it probably would be awesome. Subsequent viewings, it wouldn't be. And I feel like this episode is the one episode that didn't prioritize what it wanted to do. It kind of did some stuff, kind of went in a little bit of a muddled direction, and then started setting up stuff for the next couple of years that should have waited. Definitely all of it should have waited until the very end. Maybe a few hints earlier on, like we got in the first 19.5 minutes, but the episode itself, the story itself, doesn't really focus on wrapping it up so much, as opposed to kind of meandering a little bit. This story is more disappointing than bad. It's a good episode, but it does meander. It does kind of damage character growth and relations between characters. It kind of ruins the emotional journey throughout the series. And if the Doctor had had a plan from the start to evade his death, that would be fine. In fact, that would be pretty great. But it's a last-minute change of mind, and one that was pretty much convinced by in a brilliant scene, he was convinced it was time to go. And then not a scene later, although we don't see it at that point, we see it a bit later on, what follows that scene, he then basically goes actually thinking about it, and then we get his plan here, and it doesn't quite work. I will say the production is great, and it's executed well, apart from a couple whizzy-panny shots, I believe, in some places. So execution-wise is great, and some fantastic performances from our cast here. Absolutely fantastic. Everyone's giving it 100%. But ultimately, the story kind of fails when it comes to prioritising what it wants to do, and instead meanders and kind of tries to set up stuff for future stories, whilst also trying to wrap up this series' stuff, minus a few things staying open-ended. And ultimately, it just feels like a muddle. So I'm going to be giving The Wedding of River Song a 6 out of 10. Like I said, it's not bad. It's just disappointing. It's disappointing because it damages the character growth and development of the Doctor. It meanders around the actual plot. It doesn't really tie up the series arc that brilliantly. It's more focused on setup for for the next series, which won't actually even have this as the focus of that series, and instead have to wait until the 11th Doctor's final story, plus one other from Series 7. And it kind of feels like a letdown. After all this time, it feels like a letdown. The first 19.5 minutes are fucking awesome, but after that, it then goes downhill a little bit. And whilst there are some really cool moments and some great stuff, and on execution, the execution is amazing, and the cast do outstanding performances, but ultimately the story itself just kind of falls a bit flat throughout the episode, especially with the twist. And yeah, I think this story could have done with I think perhaps we could have gone a different way with the revealing. It also doesn't really help that it's 45 minutes and it's got to cram the stuff with the silence breaking out and attacking everyone right in the middle of this emotional, dramatic story. It's great to have an emotional, dramatic finale, but I guess they had to include the silence and exciting moments for the audience, especially for the children, so they wouldn't get bored. But then again, everyone would be wondering how the Doctor's going to get out of this situation. So maybe they're not too worried about the silence at this moment. Maybe if this episode was an hour, perhaps that bit would have worked a bit better. Maybe we could have slowed down a little bit and done a bit more stuff and explaining, and maybe something could have been stuff could have been handled better. Ultimately, it just feels mostly disappointing. It's not bad, it's just disappointing. Would I say it's a good episode? Well, I gave it a 6, so I guess it's a meh. It's brilliantly executed. It looks brilliant. And everyone puts their heart into it. But the story doesn't quite work. It's not quite there yet. A few more tweaks perhaps, and we could have gotten something cool. We could have had something great. Sadly, didn't quite get it. It's meh. It's a meh ending. The first third is awesome, but then it goes down a bit hill with a couple of awesome bits throughout. But ultimately, it does kind of feel a bit disappointing by the end, which is a shame. This is the exact same thing with Closing Time, where it has some great character growth in the first 2/3, only for the climax of that episode to be possibly the worst of any new series story at this point in time. Here it's the same thing. It's that the first third is awesome, then it kind of goes downhill with a few awesome moments throughout for the rest of the story. So it's a bit of a shame, really. So that's it from my review of The Wedding of River Song, which is my least favourite new series finale at this point in time, and the weakest series finale of a Doctor Who series / season since season 24. Although this story is still better than that one. I don't like Dragonfire. How did I pass that at 5 out of 10? How did I pass that as a 5? I don't know. But yeah, this story is definitely better than Dragonfire. Definitely. 100% better than Dragonfire. I'm not changing my mind on that. This story is better than Dragonfire, and I'm going to keep saying that until everyone realises this story is better than Dragonfire. Well, at least in my opinion it is. But yeah, this story is better than Dragonfire. Fuck Dragonfire. So that's it from my review of Doctor Who The Wedding of River Song, and that's it from my Doctor Who Series 6 Season 32 reviews. Woo! In terms of the new series, we're halfway there. Series 13's not even started filming yet at the time of recording. Might have by the time this video's out, but not quite sure. But definitely at time of filming, Series 13 has yet to commence production, although pre-production should have been done by now. So out of the 12 series so far, we're halfway through. We've got 6 more to go, including re-reviews of series 10, 11 and 12, specifically 10 and 11. But before we get to those, we've still got series 7, 8 and 9. So we'll be starting up series 7 soon with the 2011 Christmas special, The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel.